Hey everybody, it's James from Wealthquest. Hey, I wanted to check in with you all around this idea of rationing our news intake. This is a concept that I shared on the podcast a few weeks ago, and we had a couple of questions around how do we do that? How do we limit this information overload? News media is firing at us from all angles at all the times of day, right? We've 24-hour day news on cable. Our Facebook feeds, Google News feeds, whatever it is that you're looking at is all screaming for our attention, and we have a lot of time to give it that attention. So how on earth do we ration this thing? And so I just want to share a few ideas with you of what I've been doing as a way to help with that. The first is I would encourage us all to be intentional about when we engage with news. I find that if I engage in surfing and scrolling through news feeds or checking the internet or turning on a cable news channel first thing in the morning, it sets me up for an anxious day. I'm not ready for it. I haven't prepared for it. I haven't centered myself and gotten to a place where I'm ready to face the day. Right out of the gate, I'm knocked on my heels with whatever the news is for that day, and I don't recover. And so I want to encourage us to shift that timeline back. If one of the first things you're doing in the morning is turning on the TV and listening and having it play in the background, almost like our background music, I would argue we're setting ourselves up for a really bad day. It not only makes us less productive because we're chewing on all that anxiety, it also makes us substantially less relational. And that is not serving us. So after we've moved it later in the day, and for me, I'm intending to use my lunchtime as that window, the next step that I've been taking is limiting that window. How long am I going to engage when I choose to open this news feed, or when I choose to check this out, or I choose to turn on the TV and listen to cable news? How long am I going to give them to flood me with fear before I turn it off? Is it 10 minutes? Is it 20 minutes? Is it 30 minutes? I would argue that if it's longer than 30 minutes, you're probably setting yourself up for too much news. We're not that far removed from a generation where Walter Cronkite would tell us in 30 minutes everything we need to know about the day, and then we would go to bed. But now, 24 hours a day, they're screaming at us with all kinds of opinions and exaggerations. And so we need to squeeze that back down to a reasonable amount of time so that we don't fall into this cycle that is hard to get out of, where we just stay glued to it and we let it flood over us. The third idea I wanted to share was check in with a couple of different outlets. It's really easy for us, with all of our personal bias, which we all have, to continually go to a source that tends to confirm and reinforce that bias. It feels good to listen to a news outlet that tells you you're right. The problem is they're feeding a very specific audience a very specific opinion. And when we hear that over and over again, we assume that it's true. It's still an opinion. And when we check in with multiple outlets, even the ones we might disagree with, what we find is we actually get better at pulling the facts out and leaving the rest behind. When we only listen to one source, it all sounds like fact. And that's the problem. By checking in with these other sources, we actually can be better at identifying what really is fact and what's actually just an angle or an axe to grind. And the last thing I want to share with you is be careful with how you engage in conversations about the news. If you talk to someone on a regular basis about the news and you find yourself more anxious when it's done than when you started, you might want to pick a different topic with that person. When we engage in conversations around the news and it shifts from this is really interesting, or I found this fascinating, or this was surprising to me, into this is terrifying, this is awful, I feel scared, we feed that fear back to each other and we get into a cycle that doesn't serve either of us. And so if those are the kinds of conversations you're having, choose to have a different conversation with that person and see if you can find people where you can have news conversations that stay calm and curious rather than anxious. I hope those thoughts are helpful. We really want to encourage all of us to stay connected to the things that matter. News matters, but it should be a portion of your day, not all of your day. I hope that's encouraging. We wish you all the best. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay away from so much news. We'll talk to you next week.